And the payroll protection program for businesses ends early next month. Washington is dragging its feet, but struggling Americans are wondering what's next.
And new tonight, first job fair since the pandemic began draws hundreds. We're going to talk to those who are looking for work.
As much as I love my job and love people that I work with and my students, to me, it wasn't worth the risk at all.
Some teachers decide they won't return to their classroom and the career they love because of fears for their own safety. We hear from them tonight.
Remember how last week temperatures were running below average? This week, not so much. We're tracking excessive heat. I've got the details coming up.
This is NBC Palm Springs.
And good evening. Thank you for joining us tonight. I'm Gino Lamont.
And I'm Sarah Sanchez. Topping our news this evening, more than 4.2 million Americans have been infected with COVID-19. And the CDC published a forecast that predicts up to 160,000 U.S. deaths by mid-August, while work on a vaccine continues. Senate Republicans release a new economic stimulus proposal. That's where we begin tonight. Millions of people are waiting to hear what Congress plans to do to help them financially during the economic shutdown. Republicans are introducing their version of the CARES Act. It's called the HEALS Act. Daytona Everett is here in studio to show us why the proposed measure is facing an uphill battle. Daytona.
Sarah, while the plan provides another round of those $1,200 stimulus checks, Congressman Raul Ruiz tells me other parts of the legislation, like unemployment assistance, are falling flat, and because of that, it's likely we could see another delay in Congress.
States will not be able to quickly restart any enhanced unemployment benefits because Senate Republicans dithered for what seems like an eternity.
Better late than never, the Senate GOP has finally revealed details on their economic rescue package. The legislation is coined the HEALS Act and includes another $1,200 stimulus check for taxpayers who qualify, a reduction in unemployment benefits capping them at $200 a week from the original $600 a week for the unemployed under the CARES Act, more PPP for struggling small businesses, $105 billion to help schools reopen, $16 billion to boost testing capacity, and more. But House Democrats say it's not enough.
Do you think a package like this could even pass through Congress?
You know, I don't even think it's going to pass through the Senate. I hear that there's a lot of conflict even within the Republican caucus in the Senate.
There's no secret that the month is coming to an end and rent is due, bills are due. When can Americans see this cash in their pocket?
Well, that's a good question, and that's why for over 60 days now, we've been really putting a lot of pressure on Senator Mitch McConnell to really take up the HEROES Act.
Mitch McConnell saying today the $1 trillion HEALS Act, which comes in $2 trillion cheaper than the HEROES Act, is the answer.
We've allocated that in a way that we think makes the most sense for the country at this particular time.
Negotiations are expected to continue into August, leaving aid up in the air, which is a hard pill to swallow for a lot of people as some protections expire this week. Join us later in this hour for my full interview with Congressman Ruiz. We dive a little bit deeper into topics like eviction protections right here in Riverside County. For NBC Palm Springs, I'm Daytona Everett.
All right, thank you, Daytona. The Coachella Valley's unemployment rate has hovered near 30% since May, and 1 in 4 jobs in the valley depend on tourism. That's why at one of the first job fairs since the pandemic began, people were lining up in the early morning hours. Our Nico Payne is live now from Cathedral City with more. This is not your average job fair. Nico.
That's right. The job fair was put on by Agua Caliente, and they're hoping to open this casino that you see here behind me by the end of the year. But before then, they will need to fill over 500 positions. And this morning, over 600 people attended the event, and casino reps tell me they have over 1,000 applications of people have been applying to multiple positions.
I'm interested in working. I have been laid off for 4 months now. I'm interested on applying for the front desk position or any position to have like interaction with the guest.
Andres is just one of about 1,000 applicants hoping to fill a position at one of Agua Caliente's casinos.
We're getting ready to open a casino, and it's just before the new year, so we were looking for 500 great people to join us in the Agua Caliente Casino Cathedral City.
This job fair is the casino's first step in the recruitment process, and applicants were able to apply for various positions at all 3 casino locations.
Anything from valet to slot techs, food and beverage positions, management positions, pretty much runs the gamut.
And safety precautions are being taken here at the job fair. You can see people are standing 6 feet apart, and each applicant is having their temperature checked before they enter.
I was very impressed with the process of it. You know, it was all done in a timely manner. They've found a system that works. I mean, it seems to have gone down very quickly. Of course, they started very early in the morning.
Casino reps tell us that dealer school will be starting soon. That's where you can learn all the card games and how to properly deal.
It's a fun-filled environment. It's always on the go. You meet different walks of life every single day. But you do have to be open to 24/7, 365. We're here year-round for everybody.
Back out here live, we're taking another look at the progress of the new casino, and casino representatives tell me that they had a bigger turnout than expected, but they will hold another job fair if they find they need to fill more positions. Reporting live in Cathedral City, I'm Nico Payne. I'll send it back to you in the studio.
All right, thank you, Nico. We're going to head out now, take a look at our Agua Caliente Casino. Cam Rancho Mirage looking down at the pool area. Looks like the folks are enjoying the cool pool water while staying socially distant. A little bit of breeze out there as well. So let's check in with Chief Meteorologist Mike Everett for the latest and what's going on in the Weather Center. Hey, Mike.
That's a very pleasant scene out there. It doesn't tell the temperature story. It is warm out there. In fact, last week we had a phenomenal run where temperatures were running below average. That is not the case this week. We managed to get ourselves warm today. We got up to 112, 113 today. I'll tell you more about that in the full forecast. As it stands right now, we're looking at northwesterly winds at 20 miles an hour sustained at Palm Springs International. You saw those trees blowing around. Gusts getting up to about 30 miles an hour tonight. After the sun sets, the atmosphere will get a chance to cool. That number will come down, as will that one as well. And hopefully this number will go up. It's 12% humidity out there. It's hot. It's dry. It's late July, and we're right on the cusp of August. So you know what that means? It's time to set up a ridge of high pressure over top of the southwest, and that's exactly what's going to happen. Last week, we were the beneficiaries of some low pressure that pushed in there and kept things regulated. Well, now it's going to be all about that offshore flow and some very warm temperatures. In fact, as I push the magic button, nothing in place right now, but if you look off Coachella Valley and all parts off towards the east will be under an excessive heat watch. That starts on Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. We'll see those numbers really punch up into the high 1-teens and possibly the lower 120s. Case in point, next 3 days brought to you by Comfort Air shows us in the mid 1-teens Tuesday and Wednesday, and then Thursday we're going to take the lid off. I'll tell you how hot it gets and more importantly how long it lasts coming up.
All right, thank you, Mike. Here's a look at the latest COVID-19 numbers from Riverside County and the Coachella Valley. And as you know, the county is no longer releasing updates on those numbers over the weekend. So what you're looking at is 3-day totals. More than 1,700 new cases were reported in Riverside County over the weekend. 343 from the Coachella Valley. 34 new deaths countywide, 10 of those from here in the desert.
There are more than 30,000 confirmed cases of COVID-19 in Riverside County, but the real number of infections could be as high as 175,000. That's coming from the results of an antibody study that was released today. County health officials say this underscores the need to wear face coverings because people might have the virus without presenting any symptoms.
Yeah, in fact, Imperial County has one of the highest COVID-19 death rates in the state, and the president of a local union says the city of El Centro is largely responsible for that outbreak. Our Olivia Sandusky joins us now with more on that. Olivia.
Gino, with an unemployment rate nearing 30%, the city of El Centro has felt pressure throughout the pandemic to reopen their economy. But Joe Jeffel with that union, he feels their actions put the community at risk and blames them for deaths within his own union.
COVID-19 has hit Imperial County hard, and as the area's positivity rate nears 20%, the president of a local union says more could have been done to protect the community.
There was no plan in place. And our initial phone calls were falling on deaf ears. And right now, the city of El Centro, in my opinion, is creating an atmosphere that allows for the spread of coronavirus.
Duffel represents businesses and employees in the Imperial Valley. One of his El Centro stores recently had 35% of its employees test positive, resulting in one death.
I hold them absolutely accountable for this. You've got elected officials from the state level and from the county level saying, look, we'll work with you. And every time that there's a mandate from the governor's office, you're getting pushback from the city of El Centro.
Assembly member Eduardo Garcia has been in conversation with city leaders throughout Imperial County. He says enforcement needs to be increased at the city level.
There's a lot more we can do here locally to enforce some of these rules. And they don't have to be punitive. They just have to be stern and backed up with science.
El Centro reopened in May, but was encouraged by Governor Newsom to close down a month later as case numbers spiked. Now the mayor says they've tightened up their regulations and are following state orders.
And we purchased about 500 of those touchless thermometers that we are also giving away to local businesses. We also have purchased a significant amount of masks that we have donated to our local businesses.
But Duffel says their actions are too late.
What has been allowed to be done there is absolutely shameful. And I'm not exaggerating. People are dying. People are dying because they want to play a political game.
Assembly member Eduardo Garcia also tells me the state's newly formed strike teams, which enforce COVID-19 regulations, will be heading to Imperial County in the next few weeks to help mitigate the spread in those hotspots. Olivia Sandusky, NBC Palm Springs.
Coronavirus coverage brought to you by East Valley COVID-19 testing site, serving residents of eastern Coachella Valley.
Well, it was a big week in the hunt for a vaccine for coronavirus.
Massive new trial phase starts today, though. Tens of thousands of people will be administered what researchers hope will be the vaccine for COVID-19. We'll have more ahead. And masks have been mandatory in California for quite some time, but there's still some persistent myths out there. So do masks really prevent oxygen flow? That story is still ahead. Plus, buying habits are changing. We'll have more on how the pandemic is affecting everything from back to school shopping to how much hair care products we're buying. That's coming up after the break. Parents across the country are preparing to once again turn their dining rooms into classrooms. It might seem like back to school shopping would then be down, but it's expected to be up because parents are investing in home classrooms now. K through 12th grade parents will likely spend close to $800 on average, and most will be shopping online.
And according to Unilever, sales of ice cream has increased 26% in the second quarter, and a surprise to nobody. And another no-brainer, sales for deodorant plunging. Sales for other personal care products like skincare, hair care products also sunk because, well, we're staying home. We don't care what we smell like.
That explains so much.
So much
about what's happening
right
around
there
here.
In that whole story. All right, coming up after the break. Mike, after the break. There he is. He's standing there right now.
Luckily, TVs don't pick up smell. Agua Caliente Casino Camp downtown Palm Springs showing a blustery but otherwise pleasant evening out there. Take advantage because it's about to heat up. I'll tell you about it when we come back. Welcome back. Let's see. Well, we have blue sky, check. We have gusty winds, check. And we have temperatures that are about to burst into the upper 110s and possibly lower 120s. Yeah, it's late July, early August in the Southern California desert. Let's take a look at what we got going on here. First of all, I want to show you the big picture as we move to infrared. We are looking at some tropics that are considerably calmer than they were going into the weekend. I want to start off by showing you Douglas again. A lot of folks very nervous in the Hawaiian Islands this weekend. Thankfully, the storm actually went to the north, even though forecast models were suggesting that it would make a direct landfall. Kind of skirted them, picked up some waves, a little bit of rain there, and now is just sitting here as a Category 1 storm. Is expected to get picked up by the jet stream and then just ripped apart as it makes its way back across the Pacific. Meanwhile, the remnants of what was Hurricane Hana made landfall near Corpus Christi. Heavy rain in many spots there. Did a good bit of damage there, but still a minor hurricane. Just kind of did the usual garden variety amount of damage, nothing major. And then Gonzalo got to the north of Puerto Rico there and is being pulled apart by some wind shear. We're perfectly okay with that. And the other thing we're looking at right now is this mess here has yet to become organized, but does have an 80% chance of development of it as it comes off the Cape Verde Islands. 'Tis the season. We'll keep you apprised of any new developments there. Meanwhile, what we are talking about here locally is a ridge of expanding high pressure that's going to get us warm this week. Excessive heat watch Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. I'll show you the numbers in a moment. We already took a little bit of a taste there earlier by looking at Thursday. Wait till you see the weekend. Temperatures across North America are warm. 93 in New York tomorrow. Yikes. 90 and muggy and rainy in Miami. 95 tomorrow in Billings. And then look at that. Portland, 88 degrees. Vancouver and Seattle, right in the sweet spot, though. Upper 70s. A great time of year to be there. And really long, wonderful days up in the north. 113 was our high today. Remember, last week we were running delightfully below that average of 108. Yeah, today we really built on that. 119 is the record for this time of year. 80 is the overnight temperature we got to. 78 is the 30-year average. There's good be some issues along the coast with some cloud cover. It's kind of been a thing throughout the entire month of July. Case in point, we're 108. It's 69 in LA right now, 70 in San Diego, 111 out towards Havasu. We've got 105 in Thousand Palms, upper 90s in the Yucca Valley, and 73 up in Big Bear. Wind has backed off about 2 degrees. We'll continue to do that as we go through the rest of the evening, but it stays blustery until about 9 o'clock tonight. 91 at 12 a.m. It's going to set us up for another warm start tomorrow in the upper 70s and lower 80s. And then look at that. We're going to build on what we did today with some low dew points in the upper 30s and lower 40s. It'll be hot. It'll be dry. Look for 115 in Indio and Palm Desert, 114 towards Thousand Palms, 105 in Joshua Tree. Hikers, take extra precautions there. Do not head out in midday heat, no matter how much water you've got. Temperatures peak this weekend. In fact, looks like we'll be in that 119, 120 range on Friday, thus the watch. Looks like next week we'll back it off into the 110s, 115 on Sunday.
Wearing a mask is mandatory in California, but some people worry wearing a mask restricts our oxygen. Tai Wong looks into that myth.
People believe that having a mask decreases your oxygen levels.
To wear or not to wear. Many states have enforced a face covering mandate in order to contain the spread of COVID-19. As much of the country is seeing a second spike in coronavirus cases, the debate over a face covering mandate continues on. Now, many people state that they don't like to wear their mask because it affects the way that they breathe. Now, I took that reasoning to the test here at Arnett Ogden Medical Center.
wearing a mask is proven to decrease the risk of transmission, not only for the person wearing it, but also for the person that they're interacting with.
At first, Dr. Nasir and respiratory therapist Bobby Hurlbert took my original oxygen and carbon dioxide levels without wearing a mask. Then I tested my levels 3 different times wearing a blue surgical mask, a cloth mask, and a makeshift covering with the bandana. The monitor showing my carbon dioxide levels in the yellow, oxygen intake in the blue, and how much I breathe in each minute in the white. Those findings?
The presence of a mask does not interfere with oxygen delivery or eliminating carbon dioxide from your body.
I also wore 2 masks to see if any changes would happen, but
having 2 masks on does not change the oxygen or carbon dioxide levels.
During my examination, I also did physical activity such as 10 jumping jacks and jogged in place for 30 seconds while wearing a mask. Data shows that the levels did change, but my body was actually receiving more oxygen when I was active. When asked about people who do have chronic respiratory diseases like asthma,
chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, and some of the other respiratory diseases are not a contraindication or a problem with wearing a mask.
He says there are very few anatomic diseases that prevent someone from wearing a mask, like if they depend on assistive devices.
All right, still ahead, we'll take you to Washington, where the body of Congressman John Lewis is lying in state.
This is a live picture from the U.S. Capitol. We'll show you the congressman's journey through the nation's capital, where thousands line the streets to pay tribute. Plus, experts are calling it the next COVID-19 super spreader event. We'll have a report on where they're already seeing clusters of outbreaks. And later tonight, more stores announce they're closing on Thanksgiving. Is this the end of Black Friday as we know it? Stay with us. You're looking live at the U.S. Capitol, where the body of Congressman John Lewis is lying in state. He died July 17th after a brief battle with pancreatic cancer. His body will remain in the rotunda for 2 days. The week-long celebration of Lewis's life saw mourners gathering as the hearse carrying his casket paused in front of landmarks that meant so much to the congressman, including the Martin Luther King and Lincoln Memorials, the Museum of African American History, and Black Lives Matter Plaza, where he visited just weeks before his passing.
John firmly focused on the future, on how to inspire the next generation to join the fight for justice.
Pelosi was joined by Democratic presidential candidate Joe Biden and his wife at the Capitol to pay respects to Lewis this afternoon. President Trump released a statement mourning Lewis's death over the weekend. Congressman Lewis's funeral is in Atlanta on Thursday.
All right, taking a live look there, courtesy of our Agua Caliente Casino cam. Let's check in with NBC Palm Springs Chief Meteorologist Mike Everett with the check of your forecast.
Not seeing the palm trees as blowing as much as they were an hour ago, but still gusty out there, tracking some sustained winds along the I-10 corridor tonight, currently about 18 to 20 miles an hour. Gusts getting up to about 25, 30 tonight. The later that it gets, the calmer it will become. In fact, harbinger of the future, looking off towards the west here, already seeing single digits up in the mountains there, and some light winds out towards Joshua Tree and 29 Palms. Again, by about 9, 10 o'clock tonight, we should be able to get ourselves there. We'll talk about that in the full forecast. It was warm today. We broke that 110 barrier. In fact, 108 is the 30-year average for today's date, so we ran about 5 degrees above that. Cooling very nicely now. Winds coming in sustained about 18 to 20 at the airport right now as well, and humidity making a nice recovery. We were down to about 9-10% this afternoon, so back to 13 is a pretty nice improvement. Take a look at radar. There have been some issues with fog and cloud cover along the coast in the mornings. That's mixing out beautifully in the evenings, but the big story is all that red. We are getting ready for some excessive heat. I'll give you all the details on that. Next 3 days brought to you by Comfort Air. Warm, and hot headed our way. And that's not even the hottest. I'll tell you when it peaks and tell you when it cools down again coming up.
This could be a big week for coronavirus vaccine researchers. Today, Moderna is set to begin phase 3 trials, expanding testing of its vaccine to 30,000 volunteers. The crucial stage will determine how effective it could be in preventing COVID-19 infection. The FDA requires all vaccines be at least 50% effective to receive approval.
President Trump's national security advisor has tested positive for coronavirus. The White House says Robert O'Brien has mild symptoms and is self-isolating and working from a secure location off-site. The White House says there's no risk of exposure to the president or the vice president.
Summertime celebrations have officials across the country sounding the alarm. From Michigan to Florida to Oregon, parties are leading to clusters of COVID-19 cases, many of them young adults. According to experts, parties have the potential to turn into super spreader events if people are crowded together, especially inside, and not wearing masks. Leading health experts say limit gatherings to a small group, stay outdoors, wear masks, and keep that 6 feet distance between you and others.
And just weeks before schools are set to reopen for in-person learning in Florida, the state records a 34% increase in children under the age of 17 testing positive for COVID-19. It's all happening in the last 8 days. There's also been a jump in children requiring hospitalization. As of last week, more than 300 kids have been hospitalized since the beginning of the pandemic. 5 children in that state have now died from COVID-19 complications.
Local public schools are set to start the year online, but across the country, other teachers are planning their return to the classroom for in-person learning. But some teachers have decided that's a risk they're not willing to take. A recent poll found 1 in 5 teachers says they're unlikely to go back to the classroom, fearing they'll get sick. 9 out of 10 are worried about enforcing social distancing.
Kids are kids. Kids are going to do what kids do. They're messy by nature. They're social by nature. Keeping them 6 feet apart is a huge challenge.
A challenge or impossible?
Well, probably impossible.
A risk the American Federation of Teachers estimates will cost $2.3 million per school for masks, hand sanitizer equipment, and staff to disinfect. The fear is education is already underfunded in this country, so it won't meet the challenge.
Target and Dick's Sporting Goods will now close on Thanksgiving this year. Last week, Walmart announced that they too were closing for the first time since the 80s. All of these major stores say they recognize Black Friday and the holiday shopping season usually means huge crowds, but in the era of COVID-19, they would like those crowds not to be quite so large all in one day. Some brands say they'll start pushing holiday discounts as early as Halloween. Coming up in sports, baseball is finally back, and we'll have highlights from the weekend, including the Dodgers, who managed to split a series with the lowly San Francisco Giants. Plus, several games postponed today after a COVID-19 outbreak among 2 major league teams. How will it affect the rest of the season? We'll talk about it coming up.
And we'll take another look at our top stories, including the Senate's newly unveiled HEALS Act and the unfolding crisis in Imperial County.
Welcome back. Another gorgeous live look for you, courtesy of our Walter Clark 111 camera. Blue sky out there and seeing some of those palm trees blowing around here as well. Again, tonight's one of those nights where the I-10 corridor is a bit of a wind tunnel. I'll show you what it will do coming up in just a moment, but let's start with the big picture. I've got infrared zoomed way out because there's a few things I want to show you here. Hurricane Doug, still hurricane status, made a lot of folks really nervous in the Hawaiian Islands this weekend. Thankfully, graciously went to the north there. Still brought in some gusty winds and some rain, holding on to a low category 1 status. Expected to get picked up by the jet stream and ripped apart over the next 48 hours. Shall not be an issue. Remnants of what was Hurricane Hannah making landfall right near Corpus Christi there on the Texas coast. Heavy rain there, now also ripped apart that it's made landfall, just kind of sitting there as a post-tropical low. It'll get pushed off towards the east as well. Keeping an eye on an invest. That's a fancy way of saying another potential storm making its way off the Cape Verde Islands right now. Looks like over the next few days it's got 80% chance of development, so we'll keep an eye on that for you as well. Things across the region, well, is hot. So you've got red flag warnings up towards the northwest there. You've also got heat advisories up towards Seattle. It's going to be warm. We're talking about upper 80s there in some spots, especially inland. Red flag warnings, well, whenever you get gusty winds and low humidity, you see that, and we're seeing that in parts of Oregon, Washington, and even into California. Excessive heat watch, I'll tell you about that in a moment. It's warm in the northeast. They've got heat advisories in place. Even Europe right now has heat advisories in place. It's hot in France, so late July, early August, that's what we get. Excessive heat watch for us kicks in on Thursday. It looks like Thursday morning, Friday, and Saturday, we're going to see temperatures that are going to be well above average. I'll show them to you in a moment, but if you want to make some plans for this weekend, now's the time to do it. We were hot today. Remember last week we ran graciously below average. 108 is the 30-year norm for this time of year. 113 is what we got today. 119 is the record, and we were not able to get into the 70s overnight. 80 is where we bottomed out. Along the coast, an entirely different story. They're taking May gray and June gloom into July. It's keeping them in the 60s and 70s right now. And then, of course, obviously, the further inland you go, the hotter it is. 91 in Yucca Valley right now, a cool 73 in Big Bear, and those winds will continue to wind down as we go through the rest of the evening there. Looks like we'll finally get those sustains down into single digits and be calm by midnight. We will still be warm at midnight. 91 is where we'll be. We will do our very best to start in the upper 70s and lower 80s tomorrow. Add about a degree to what you saw today, and that's what Tuesday looks like. 115 in Indio, 105 up in Joshua Tree, and it just gets hotter from here. Comfort Air 7-day forecast shows us peaking on Friday in that 119, 120 range. We'll back it off into the 1-teens again next week.
In tonight's Showbiz Report, more than 4 million people signed up for HBO Max in the 1 month since it launched. The company started the premium streaming platform back in May. It says by the end of June, both HBO and HBO Max had a combined 36.3 million subscribers, apparently exceeding expectations. We'll be right back after the break. Stick around. Quick check of our top stories tonight is new relief for struggling Americans could be coming soon. Senate Republicans unveiled their $1 trillion COVID aid package called the HEALS Act. The GOP's plan has another round of stimulus checks, plus it cuts enhanced employment benefits from $600 to $200 and would allocate billions to testing and reopening of schools. Our Daytona Everett spoke with Congressman Raul Ruiz today about the new proposal.
Congressman Raul Ruiz here to talk money with us today. Congressman, thanks for joining us.
It's good to be here.
All right, so we're hearing more details. There was an unveiling of the economic stimulus package from the Senate that dropped down today. What are you hearing on your end?
We're very concerned that it has no monies for our cities or states. That's a big problem for us in the Coachella Valley because we know that Palm Springs, Desert Hot Springs, Indio, and other cities are having a fiscal crisis right now. We're also concerned that they're dropping down their assistance and cutting the unemployed insurance benefit that they get extra a week. And that's difficult because we have about 20 million people who are unemployed and are relying on that monies for rent and for their medical costs.
You're very involved. You're talking to other members of the House. What's kind of the consensus right now? How is everyone feeling?
You know, everybody's pretty on edge. Everybody is talking about how our constituents are running into a roadblock with the unemployment insurance expiring, with the rent being due and the potential of being evicted.
All right, Congressman, last question for you. You mentioned evictions. Is that a possibility for Riverside County residents?
The California Governor Newsom extended the eviction moratorium until September. So in California, it's different than other individuals in other states. So we also want to look into extending the federal protections from evictions as well.
Imperial County's positivity rate for coronavirus is sitting at almost 20%. The president of the United Food and Commercial Workers Union says the county's biggest city could have done more to prevent that number. He says their lack of response to follow state orders and enforce guidelines has led to a death at one of his stores.
There was no plan in place. And our initial phone calls were falling on deaf ears. And right now, the city of El Centro, in my opinion, is creating an atmosphere that allows for the spread of coronavirus.
The mayor of El Centro says they've purchased touchless thermometers and masks for businesses across the city. He also says a lot of the COVID-related decisions are linked to the county and outside his jurisdiction.
Agua Caliente Casino is hiring. The tribe needs workers to manage everything from slot machines, table games, serving food and beverage. And it's for all three of their locations, including the new Cathedral City location, which should be open by the end of the year. They have more than 500 jobs they need to fill, but there are more applicants than positions available.
I'm interested in working. I have been laid off for 4 months now. I'm interested on applying for the front desk position or any position to have like interaction with the guest.
We're getting ready to open a casino, and it's just before the new year, so we were looking for 500 great people to join us in the Agua Caliente Casino, Cathedral City.
With the huge response to today's job fair, Agua Caliente may hold another one soon.
Desert Pass is brought to you by Mike Thompson RV. Your adventure starts here.
Well, it's considered the last great manhunt of the Old West, and it happened all around the Coachella Valley. It inspired a blockbuster movie starring Robert Redford, and in tonight's Our Desert Pass, we'll tell you the true story of the manhunt for Willie Boy. It's been referred to as the last Western manhunt, a 2-week-long trek across the deserts of Riverside and San Bernardino counties back in 1909. The pursuers were the members of a posse organized in Banning. Their goal? To bring back a Native American Paiute descent known only as Willie Boy, dead or alive.
What the hell does he want to go to Palm Springs for? What's he got there? A bunch of lungers living in tents and some Indians he don't know? God damn it, he should be headed to 29 Palms where he can get help. He should be heading up the Dry Morongo Pass.
One version of the Willie Boy story was released to moviegoers in 1969, titled, Tell Them Willie Boy Is Here. It starred Robert Redford as a fictionalized lawman tracking the armed fugitive, played by Robert Blake, across the desert.
Tell him Willie Boy is here!
Much like the film, the actual story began with a tragedy on September 26, 1909, a tragedy fueled by a forbidden love. Willie Boy loved a Native American girl named Carlotta. Her family had moved to Banning to work the fruit harvest.
They were extended cousins, but they were from the same bloodline.
Carlotta's father, William Mike, also known as Old Mike Boniface, was a spiritual leader and a medicine man. He was opposed to the relationship. Historian Kenneth Gentry explains.
He basically found his daughter with Willie Boy up in 29 Palms and told Willie Boy never to see her again, took her away. He wasn't ever allowed to look at Carlotta ever again. And about a month later, Willie Boy followed him down to Banning and then showed up at his house at night.
There are no witnesses to confirm what happened next. It is believed that Willie Boy went to ask Carlotta's hand in marriage. But before the night was over, Old Mike Boniface was dead with a bullet through his left eye, and Willie Boy and Carlotta were on the run.
In all sincerity, it was probably a murder. He took a rifle to go get a girl, which is to say somebody died at the end, but Mike's wife waited 9 to 12 hours before she actually reported it to the police, which leads one to believe that if it was a murder, it was at least accidental, which is to say a lot of people will say that she did that because she was fearing Willie Boy. Just as many people will say that she did that to give them a head start.
The Indian man wanted to marry a daughter. It wasn't uncommon for the young man to kill the father. Yeah, we're on the reservations. You know.
Yeah.
But the problem was they got inside the Banning city limits, and that brought the white man's law into it.
So from Banning, a posse was organized.
Originally, it was a sheriff. It was 2 Indians who were working as guides. It was just a small group of people who were right there at the time, set out after him. After a couple of days, it doubled, and then after a couple of weeks, it ended up, as I said, well over 200.
During one encounter with the posse, Carlotta died of a gunshot wound. Whether the bullet was fired by Willie Boy or one of the deputies is still unclear to this day.
She was shot from about 300 yards behind and above. If Willie Boy had shot her, he would have been face to face. It would have been an intimate act, if you ask me. He definitely would have shot her in the back, and furthermore, if he did, I really doubt that the posse wouldn't have heard that shot and then found her warm body, which is to say, someone shot her with a rifle in the back, and it's believed that it was one of the posse members.
Grandpa said she was shot through her breast from the back. He said, well, it would have been impossible for the posse to do it because they wouldn't shoot at anything that they couldn't see the whole body, including the head, because they were trying to shoot Willie Boy in the head.
There are few more familiar with the Willie Boy legend than Morgan Reish. His grandfather, Deputy Charles Reish, took a bullet during the ordeal.
Willie Boy shot, I think it was 3 horses out from under the posse with a rifle. He's trying to put the posse afoot. Grandpa always said he wasn't shooting at him. He was intending to get his horse. He shot high, shooting a 30-30 with open sights 300 yards, and hit him in the right hip bone. And his handcuffs, he was a deputy sheriff, his handcuffs turned the bullet. Instead of going straight to it, took the top of this hip bone off and the point of 2 vertebrae. Well, when I talked to my grandpa about it, I said, did it hurt when you got shot? He says, yeah, it felt like somebody knocked me off my horse with a 2x6.
Charlie Ricci was shot, and they had to basically disband and get back to help. At that point, there were so many people wanting to hunt Willie Boy down. They chose to wait a week before they went back out to look for him, which is very awkward in the first place. With so many people gearing up to go, waiting a week is just confusing to me.
The nearly 600-mile chase came to a close on October 15th at Ruby Mountain near Landers. This is where deputies found a body believed to be that of Willie Boy's. It was decided that the cause of death was suicide since his body wasn't brought back. Some historians have questioned the details around Willie Boy's death, or if he was even actually dead.
The body didn't show any signs of having decomposed in the desert like a body would, which is to say, first of all, animals hadn't just taken his body away. His shirt was still tucked in, his overalls were still over. they didn't have a clear shot of his face, and even if he had decomposed for a month, at the time, the practice was to show off your kill. Any other posse would have had numerous photos with him. Not only did they not photograph his body properly, but then they burned it on site immediately, which, again, there's too many questions.
We took a shovel up there and we sifted the dirt, and we found all the hardware off of the bib overalls he wore, and fragments of teeth and everything. If he got away, I don't know how come we found fragments of teeth in when we screened the sand and found all that hardware off of his clothes that he was wearing.
But if it wasn't Willie Boy's body that was found that day, then what happened to Willie Boy?
There's plenty of stories that go on to say that he retired and lived for a long time in Nevada and died of tuberculosis.
Without official proof of death, some imaginative reporters speculate about Willie Boy to sell more newspapers. One such story involved President William Howard Taft, who was on a railroad tour of Southern California at the time.
Basically, the idea was that Willie Boy was going to assassinate the president just because he happened to be running from a posse during the same time that the president would have been in the same area. General area. San Bernardino is a huge county.
Some organizers politicized the Willie Boy manhunt to serve their needs, such as some temperance groups who used the drunken Indian racial stereotype to push for prohibition.
One comment basically got alcohol into the situation, and it turned him into a violent drunk. I'm sure he had some alcohol in his lifetime, but I doubt that it was a factor in this case.
And now that it's been more than a century since the manhunt, and whether this fugitive from justice was a folk hero or a cold-blooded killer is still up for debate. But if anyone should inquire about the last manhunt of the American West, just tell them Willie Boy is here.
I don't see him as a hero, and I definitely don't see him as a cold-blooded murderer. I think he was in love with maybe the wrong person, and circumstances just didn't. He just had a very bad hand.
Brighter Side of the News is brought to you by Holland RV, located off the I-10 at Washington.
For 30 years, Joe and Tom from Wisconsin have been saying they'll split the jackpot if one of them ever wins the lottery. Well, Tom actually won, so he's splitting the $22 million with good old Joe.
It's quite an experience when I read them first 2 or 3 numbers, and I kind of froze.
And I said, "Are you jerking my bobber?"
Ouch. Tom says a handshake is a handshake. Good night.